What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 preview for the Sanderson Farms Championship. Going to get you ready for all of your DFS and betting exposure. But first off, look at the fantasy side of what we're doing over on Draftkings. That'll include a look at the weather report. We'll talk through some ownership at the top of the board as well, some shots gained metrics, how to build your player pool, and then on the pick'em side of things, some stat averages both for PGA and for DP World Tour, and some strategies and a game plan to attack that side as well. But any sort of questions, any kind of player pool deep dives that you have for me, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. Other than that, we've got an order of business to attend to. So let's go ahead and just hop on in. The first thing to note is that the PM wave for DFS played easier today, about 0.9 shots easier than the morning. It played easier for the first day as well. It was much less pronounced though, only 0.3 shots. Today though, the wind in the afternoon really died down. And even though on Data Golf here, it still says it was in that 7 to 8 mile an hour range, I can tell you that watching the broadcast, it looked a whole lot calmer than that. And the announcers, you saw them commenting on it multiple times as well, saying that it was just perfect conditions for the players this afternoon. So I think that had a lot to do with it being that 0.9 shot difference. And although the weather forecast looks almost the exact same, I don't think it's going to be as drastic for tomorrow, at least from the weather perspective. But the form of the players up top, particularly the guys that are the best over the first 36 holes, are going to have the advantage over the guys that don't have as good a form towards the bottom, because when we get to round 3, round 4, they start to structure tee times where the best players are going off last, and that's also going to make an impact here. But when we take a look at the weather, the winds do look a little bit more substantial for the first couple hours. Wind gusts close to 20 miles an hour, about 8 to 9 a.m. Also sustained winds that are 1 miles an hour higher than the afternoon. So realistically, not a massive difference from that side to the other, but that's the exact kind of scenario that they've been calling for Thursday, Friday, and that led to a 0.3 shot difference, and then today that 0.9 shot difference. So it'll probably lie somewhere in between the two, but then when you add on top of it the talent gap and the form differential towards the guys that are going off later, I think it might be in that 0.5 to a 1 shot difference range. So when you're building your player pool, if you're trying to decide between two players and they have similar ownership numbers, then take the guy that's going off later. But unfortunately, because the guys at the top are playing the best golf, a lot of people out there are going to try and use them in their lineup. So when we're comparing the guys going off closer towards the end compared to the guys going off earlier, they're usually going to have higher ownership. So you're going to be paying for that slightly better set of conditions with the fact that they're 1.5 to sometimes even 2 times higher owned. So there's some giving and taking that has to go on when you're making that kind of evaluation process. And I think it adds a little bit of intrigue to a set like this for round 3. And speaking of ownership, it is going to be a wacky one from there. Ownership for round 3 is unlike anything I've seen before. Sometimes for round 4 showdown, we get a lot of condensed ownership at the top, but because of how many guys over 8 grand missed the cut this week, it is just utter madness. We've got multiple people over 30%. There are no placement points involved for Saturday. So you might expect like, oh, it's just the guys at the top. Not really. Really, anyone with a pulse that is over $9,000 and made it to the weekend has got absurd ownership for tomorrow. So we'll talk about that, leaving salary on the table as a potential viable strategy for Saturday. What's going on? Noah said, hope a day is going well. It is been busy, but excited to talk some golf here for tomorrow. Hit me up with any questions that you've got, man, and I hope your day is going fantastic for you. But let's go through some ownership at the top here. So number 1, I've got Kevin Yu, and he's $9,800. But because none of the studs are really playing that well either, I think the best of them is -6 like you have with Rasmus and Kevin Yu. No one's 40, 50% owned. If any of them had been in contention over the first couple of days, they would be close to 50% in GPPs, which is just outrageous to think about. It never happens out here in the large field contest. But all of these guys, because it is so flat across the studs, are at about that 30% number. So if you're going to get leverage to them, if you're going to use them in your player pool, you're looking at 50% plus exposure. So you've really got to pick your guys up there and commit to them. If you're playing 150 lineups, I personally am not playing 150 for this kind of a slate. It's partially because of the ownership and you can't really get any leverage at the top end of the board. And then also because the contests are utter trash. So I'm scaling back my personal exposure in my GPPs to probably about 20 to 50 lineups overall. And my player pool is about half the size of what I'm used to. So the ramifications of that down low are that I'm going to have less options. I'm being much more committed about my options in the 7, 8K range. But even in that 9, 10K range, I have to be a little bit more selective about how I'm using it. Again, unless you're a 150 max player, if you're a 150 max player, you could probably use everyone at the top and just spread out your exposure. If not, commit to your guys and use them at 50% plus of your lineups, would be what I say. But on top of that, we've also got some mega chalk in the 7K range. Like a Taylor Montgomery is nearly 20% owned. That is outrageous. He was chalky for main slate. He's a value at $7,200. He's also minus 12 at this point. So you do get a few of the leaderboard guys that start to show up. But because of the dynamic that we have with the salary going on, it's not going to be nearly as many of those guys starting in the top 5, at least in the top 5, top 10 of the ownership. So you can see Garrett Higo, another one of those players that's sneaking in there towards the end. It's just a very unique slate because of the kind of missed cuts that we've seen. And if you're somebody without a whole lot of 6 of 6s, you're not the only one. I can promise you that, right? If you can take a look at all the carnage, especially in the 8 and 9K range, a lot of people probably went 0 for 150 and going 6 of 6. And I actually haven't checked myself. I think I have a couple 6 of 6s that survived, but it can't be more than like 5-6% that I had for this week. So again, if you only had a couple lineups and you weren't able to nab one, a lot of the people out there are probably feeling the same way. But next up, we're going to go through the shots gained metrics. So that's game theory. And actually, I want to go back to the spreadsheet for just 1 second before we start talking about building a player pool. And that'll be what I'm actually looking for in my plays. And this is from my Patreon page, the spreadsheet that you guys were seeing here before. That's where you can find all the ownership projections and my entire player pool. But anyone in this category that's blacked out that I have down as a yes in my poll, I have the reasoning alongside with them. And the reason I point that out is not to sell my Patreon page. It's a nice little side benefit, I suppose. But it's mostly to show you the reasoning behind why I'm getting to players, because you should have a process for knowing who you're going to play for round 3 showdown. I look for ball striking poppers, people that had good off the tee and approach. That is the most sustainable aspect of golf from day to day. I look for short game regression candidates, people that are due for a little bit of luck or run good with the around the green and the putting. That's the most volatile portion of golf. So that's why I look for regression to the mean there. And then I also look for good course history and then high upside and high birdie percentage players, because that correlates to your Draftkings scoring. This isn't the only, set of reasons that you can use for finding your plays. You can throw in good putters on Bermuda grass. That's the surface of the week this week. You can look at good players from 150 yards and in. There's a lot of wedge opportunities and birdie looks that you're going to get in that range this week. Also, it's a par 72. You can look at par 5 scoring. There's 4 long par 5s that you can attack at this course. So if you want to use that to try and find some players, like, you can get really creative about what you're using to make your player pool, but just be extremely detailed about it and be very intentional about who you're using. You should know why you're on plays when you're selecting them into lineups. It's not only so that you're getting all the trash plays out of there, the ones that you're just clicking in there for no reason, but also so that you can evaluate it after the fact. So that's the beauty of me doing it this way, is that I can convey that reasoning to all of my subscribers, but it also lets me go after the fact and take a look at what went right and what went wrong with my exposure, and do some troubleshooting and, try and get a little bit better at my process overall. And that's something that I'm always trying to work on. I'm never always using the exact same process for any given slate. And there will be reasons added and subtracted to this list depending on the kind of slate that we're at. For example, if we're at a new golf course, we can't do course history, right? So that gets axed off of there. But if we're in windy conditions, sometimes I try and play some of the mutters that we have in the field. Those are guys that excel when it gets windy or rainy conditions. It's just that you should have a predefined set of reasons for why you're getting to plays, so that you're not just picking names out of a hat at random. That is my biggest pet peeve when it comes to hearing people play golf DFS, is that they're like, oh, he's low owned, I'll throw him into a lineup. You have a ton of low-owned players to choose from. And that was especially the case when it was main slate and there were 132 golfers. But even now that there's 67 golfers after the cut, that's how many will be playing for Saturday and Sunday, barring any withdrawals. You still have plenty of choices at sub 5 to sub 10% ownership to offset all of that chalk that you're using. So it's just, have a rhyme and reason for getting to those plays. And you don't even have to have a list of 5-6 reasons. Even if it's just 1 or 2 tags that you're using to get onto a player pool, that's better than just trying to do it based on pure luck alone, because there are a lot of people out there that you're playing against, and it's going to be tough to generate positive ROI long-term. Let's go through the shots gained metrics. And like I said, any specific player pool deep dives that you want, feel free to let me know, and we'll go through it. He said, does Champs have the yips? I don't think so, man. He's been playing well over the last couple months, so I highly doubt it. If you mean just based on this week alone, then absolutely not. Just guys miss cuts. It happens all the time, especially a player like Cam Champ that's not a stud. He was on the Corn Ferry Tour earlier this year, so I wouldn't say that. What's going on, Noah? You said Thor couldn't roll a putt in today, but his approach and off the tee was solid. He did a similar thing round one, so maybe he's due for some short game regression. He said he can definitely make some birdies if he gets the flat stick hot. I'll be using him in lineups. It's not only that, but he checks a few of the other boxes that I'm looking for. Ball striking, short game regression. He's also a high upside player, a top 25 birdie or better percentage player on the PGA Tour. So he's the absolute nuts for all things, at least for what I'm concerned. He checks 3 of the 4 boxes that I use for my player pool. However, like you saw on that sheet there before, he's one of your highest owned players because he's in that 9-10K range. So it's unavoidable. You're going to have to play some mega chalk if you're using all of your salary. And in fact, with my ownership projections, this is usually a huge no-go for me. But it's worth pointing out because I did do this with my ownership projections, is I'm leaving salary on the table on average. I don't think your average person out there is going to spend all of their salary. So even if you use a Michael Thorbjornsen, I think that's totally fine, especially if you're leaving $1,000 to $1,500 on the table, like I think a lot of people are going to do, because it's putting onto such unique combinations compared to what you typically have with PGA DFS. The differentiation that you get with leaving $1,000+ on the table, it's almost like you can play whoever the hell you want to. And if you're even somewhat cognizant of ownership, if you even have 1 to 2 leverage pieces in there on top of leaving that salary, you've got a virtually 0% chance of duplicating yourself. You could enter a million different lineups and you're probably going to be fine. And you're going to have enough leverage as well with those 1 to 2 players, because the player pools and the contests that we have for tomorrow are not very big. So you don't have to have like 4 or 5 guys that are sub 5% owned. Like 1 or 2 will get the job done on a slate like that. So I like Thor. I think that you're going to have to eat the chalk on that sort of a guy, but he's one of the players that I'll be using up there for sure. Let's go through these shots gained metrics and show you exactly what that process looks like. So the first thing we'll go to would be those ball striking poppers. Already mentioned that that's one of the key ways I use to get to my player pool. And some of your players that excelled off the tee and on approach today would be a David Lipsky, a Stephen Fisk, a Doc Redman, all really stood out. However, a lot of these guys shot like -5 to -7 rounds. And when they're scrubs, like I'll pick on a Doc Redman in particular, because I used to love playing this guy like 3-4 years ago. He was a cheap 6K guy that would always make a whole lot of birdies when he made the cut. But this is a player that's not even on the PGA Tour anymore. So like, let's not get too excited about Doc Redman here and his -7 rounds. He's very likely to come back to the field tomorrow. So a lot of these sort of players I'll kind of dismiss even with these good shots gained metrics, but not so much when it's a player that was coming in with some steam, a player that was evaluating pretty well ahead of time, like a Luke List. He was playing well heading into this event. He's won at this golf course before. I don't think we can overlook that kind of a shots gained profile. As Sam Ryder, he's like a middle tier player in this field. Like him hitting the ball well isn't something that we can scoff at, like it is with some of the more unknown quantities that we have towards the top end of the board. I guess there's not that many people that we can pick on, but like, I guess, Redman's probably the best example of that. But a Taylor Montgomery, he made like 9 birdies in his last 10 holes or something. So like the absolute nuclear of all nuclear days. A lot of these players that shot -5, -6, -7 are going to have a hard time backing that up in back-to-back rounds. So there are a few players up here that I am throwing into my lineups, but the ones that I like a lot more because they won't be nearly as highly owned are the players that are a little bit further down this list. So for example, like a Nick Dunlap, who's at -4, T56, probably going to be sub 5% in almost every contest for tomorrow. You're getting a solid ball striking Nick Dunlap, who actually gained off the tee today. That's extremely notable if you've been tracking him over the last couple years. But in gains across all 4 categories, 3 of the 4, I suppose, because he lost a little bit around the green, but all the categories that actually count around this course, he got the job done for us. So, these are the kind of players that won't get nearly as much ownership. They're also more likely to potentially have that spike rounds because they didn't already go out there and gain their 3 to 4 strokes putting the day before. Another example would be like a Davis Thompson. He had a solid ball striking day. Seamus Power, a Matty Schmid, a Jesper Svensson really stand out there. these are more so the players that you're going to see in my lineups. And because I have more of a condensed player pool, that's even more so the case. The other thing I want to point out here, guys, and we went through the top high-owned plays. The reason why that really matters for Showdown, main slate, you've got to fade some chalk to make sure you're not going to duplicate yourself with other people. But for Showdown, when we only have 18 holes to work with and we're in a scrub field like this, you have to know that there's going to be some crazy outcomes. Like Doc Redman shooting -7 or -6, whatever he got to when it was all said and done. Not many people would have expected that to happen, right? Like, you've got to know that even the quote unquote safest plays are not safe at this sort of event. I mean, just look at all the guys up top that missed the cut, like an Akshay, your Minwoo Lees that I thought might win this event. I mean, he fucking missed the cut. So like, I mean, that tells you a whole lot right there about how unpredictable this sort of a golf course can be. So that's why I go further down the list, and I'm really doing so with my exposure, because I know that this golf course is going to bring in a lot of that chaotic sort of outcomes. And I want to make sure that I'm not on those 30%ers that shoot like even or +1 tomorrow. So that's the idea with the ball striking. If we go to the short game stats, these guys that gained a whole bunch with their putting in around the green, it's tough to want to go to them in back-to-back days. That's, a very unsustainable portion of golf. It's the most variant from round to round. So like a Campos, a Frankie Sapin, all these guys that are towards the top end over here, not every single one's a fade, but every single one does get a red flag attached to their profile. And the same thing around the green, all of these guys that are heavily into the dark green, you've got to take with a slight grain of salt. And the exact opposite is true. These guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes putting around the green, that is not likely to happen the entire week. So Sam Ryder, for example, who's normally one of the better putters that we have in this field, he lost over 5.5 strokes with the short game stats. If he's even a neutral tomorrow, that is an insane improvement from day to day, let alone the kind of day-to-day improvement if he goes out there and gains 3 to 4 strokes. So, a lot of these guys missed the cut, but there's a Michael Thorbjornsen, as we had the comment on before. I think that's a really sharp take from that guy that we had in chat. I think it was Noah that mentioned that, right? 3 shots into the negative there. If he's even a neutral, that's a top 10, a top 15 round of the guys that make the cut. A Max Homa fits that same kind of stat profile. Could have been better off the tee, though. He's got to hit more fairways if he's going to have a nuclear round. But I don't expect him to only hit 28% of fairways every single day. So he'll probably improve a little bit there. And then if we get a neutral or a 1 to 2 stroke gained on the green sort of day, that would be your round of -6, -7 for Max Homa. But around the greens the same way. A lot of these guys, like a List, he lost a whole bunch around the green. Did gain 1.5 strokes putting, but him losing over 2 strokes around the green is certainly an outlier. A Harry Higgs losing 2 strokes around the green. Luke Clanton losing 1.5 around the green as well are all things that you would expect to be closer to a neutral tomorrow. So, and it's not just that you look at these around the green and putting stats, you've got to combine it with their ball striking as well. So in the case of a Michael Thorbjornsen, the reason why he's such a good play on this is that he gained about 1.5 strokes ball striking. As Sam Ryder, you can see over here, gained 3 strokes ball striking today. A Max Homa, he was slightly positive ball striking, but gained 1.5 strokes on approach. That's the most important stat category that we have of the big 4 there. That's the kind of stat profile we're looking for, right? A combination of hitting the ball well and some short game that should be coming back. That's what at least what I do in my player pool for round 3. So it's very similar to the round 2 process, just using the round 2 stats as opposed to the round 1 ones. And then on top of that, we've got a few other things that we were using in our player pool. Course history. So that's around Jackson Country Club. If you look at course history, whether it's on a database or on my Patreon sheet, as I was showing you before, I have an entire tab dedicated to their history at this golf course. Finding guys that have routinely top 10 or top 20 is always a good idea. People with familiarity and people that set up well for a certain track are always worth a few extra looks, and especially if they're going to be low owned in DFS. And then also, I take a look at high upside players. To do that, you can just go to pgtour.com. It's probably the easiest thing to research on there. You go to stats at the top. It's on that top bar. You go to scoring. Then you click on birdie or better percentage. And then the guys that are in the top 50 of the raw birdies being made per round this year are guys that you're going to want to play. And I know it seems like overly obvious, but you'd be amazed the kind of plays that you could find towards the top there, slate in, slate out, because Draftkings scoring, if you haven't looked into it too much, is directly correlated for rounds 2 and 3 Showdown to your score of that day and the amount of birdies that you're making. Your placement points, where you're starting the day before, and where you end up on the leaderboard, has literally 0 bearing on your score overall. So all you have to worry about with the guys that were playing for round 3, round 4 is different. We'll talk about that on tomorrow night's live stream. But for today, all you got to worry about the guys that can post a shit ton of birdies. So birdie or better percentage is a way to do so, but also par 5 scoring. That's something that I incorporate on top of that for some of the players that I use from that category, guys that can take on those long par 5s. So that's how I build my player pool. It's a conjunction of the shots gained metrics like we just went through, but also on top of that, using some of the stats from the entire year, using course history so that we have a well-rounded approach to try and find who we're going to play. Because if you're only using today's stats to try and figure out who's going to play well tomorrow, then you're going to be chasing your tail and you're never going to get to the absolute nuts. Today's outcomes have some sort of bearing on what's going to happen for tomorrow, but they by no means are going to give you the Rosetta Stone of what's going to happen, right? You got to incorporate some of the longer term stuff as well. That's what a lot of sharp handicappers do regardless of sport, but especially in golf. You want to rely on a play's baseline rather than their short-term form 9 times out of 10. So that's the process for Showdown, guys. We're going to circle over to the prop side here in a second after I go through any specific player pool deep dives that you throw in the chat. You said Griot, maybe somebody that we can attack. Let's look at the stats. He wasn't really on my radar, if I'm being honest with you. The approach play was solid and the short game regression is there. Let me actually do a double check on that because the stat profile you're 100% correct about is great. But look at that. He missed the cut. So that's why he's not on my profile. It makes sense why he's not somebody that we would be playing. It would have been great if he was there for the weekend. He just said, yeah, he's cut. Yeah, I didn't see your comment, but touche, man. If he was playing, he would have been a heck of a Showdown option. Now let's go through some pick'em stuff. So we're not going to have boards to go through. It is far too early for that. Also, the DP World Tour did not finish round number 2, so we're not likely to get any props on that side of things. I did throw the averages at the bottom, though, in case sites like Bet365, some of the other sports books do post anything for round number 3, but it played a whole lot harder. And we kind of called for that on the DP World Tour side. The reason why we're going to go through that first is it'll be much quicker than what we go through here for PGA. On DP World Tour, though, it was in monsoon. I mean, it was 40-mile-an-hour winds like they called for on that forecast. And Carnoustie, that we were hoping was going to play hard in round number 1, finally played hard. It played plus 2.74. So they didn't have any strokes lines up. They didn't end up posting anything for birdies on that. Weren't able to take advantage of those harder conditions. But if they do post anything for round 3, I'll just show you guys this ever so quickly. I mean, it's the exact same weather. It's not rainy during play, but it's 40-mile-an-hour winds just again. So these averages might not be as bad as round 2. It might be like +1 Carnoustie. It might be like -1 Kingsbarn and -1 Old Course, but it's still going to be a whole lot harder than what we had for round number 1. So if any of these sites do end up posting props when it comes to the DP World Tour, could be useful for going off those kind of averages. But just like for round 2, it's going to be hard to narrow down. Anytime we get 30 to 40-mile-an-hour winds, the potential for some rain during play as well, it makes it really hard to really want to count on any sort of projection. So that's why a site like Prize Picks didn't end up posting anything for round 2, and I honestly couldn't blame them. And it's also likely why there's probably not going to be anything for round number 3. So not getting my hopes up on that. I did bring up the sites just in case. Maybe we'd have something posted over there, but nothing there quite yet on Prize Picks. And I am going to at least see if they have anything on Underdog yet. Underdog is usually pretty quick to getting up some PGA stuff, but it's just the tournament finishing position stuff right now. So let's go through these stat averages. So at the top, we have the PGA ones. You can see the scoring average was -1.83. Birdie or better average was 4.21. Bogey or worse, 2.3 per round. Fairways, 7.43. And then green regulation average was 12.14, which were all very consistent with what we had the first day. I thought it might get a little bit easier. There was a chance with a slightly easier setup, and that's what we got in round 2, that it would go up to like a 4.2 to 4.3 average for birdies. It ended up going to 4.2, so not quite the 4.3, but a little bit easier than the average, which was 3.96 per round for the first day. The bogey or worse average stayed almost the exact same. I believe it was like 2.32 or 2.36. It was one of those two for round number 1. And now it was 2.3 per round. So hardly a difference there. It was a much bigger difference with that birdie or better average. Tomorrow, though, I have a hot take on what I think this golf course does because conditions look the exact same. Let's go back to that. If you're just joining us, for the prop section. Let's bring up the HRRR, which is the most accurate of these weather models. It's calling for about 10-mile-an-hour wind the entire day, slightly higher wind gusts in the morning as well. And then it's going to warm up, which will make the ball go further during the afternoon hours. I think it'll play easier during the afternoon, but this scoring average, I think, is going to be at least -2 and could be even like -2.5. It's same conditions wise, just better players playing on the weekend. And then the thing that we also have to consider with the Sanderson Farms is that it's round 3 and it's a moving day setup. They oftentimes move up some tee boxes. They set up the pins as easy as they possibly can to try and spur on some low scores and some volatility with the leaderboard. And I'm expecting the birdie average to probably be at least 4.5 per round for the field. And that's for the entire field. Elite tier players are projecting for 5+. Your bogey, your worst average could probably go down to like 2 per round as well. So this scoring average, I think, is going to improve. Birdie average improve. Bogey or worst average going to improve as well. The fairway average, that one, I don't expect to improve that much. Maybe it goes up to like 7.5 just because there's better players playing on the weekend. Conditions aren't really going to change for the fairways at all. But your green regulation average, that one should improve. So that should probably go up at least to like 12.5 per round based on some moving up some tee boxes. That's hypothetical, but they do that on most moving day setups. So I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to assume, at least with 1, maybe 2 tee boxes. And then also with the overall quality of player increasing and the form being better of players that are actually making the cut, as opposed to some of the scrubs that were shooting way over par for the first few days, that'll probably also lead to it increasing a bit. So 12.5 green average, 7.5 fairway average are pretty reasonable for the field. Two bogeys or worse, 4.5 birdies or better. And that adds up to about a minus 2.25 to maybe minus 2.5 scoring average. So, and the reason for that is that there's going to be some doubles, right? There's going to be some scoring variance that makes the scoring a little bit worse than what it should be in reality. But that's what I'm thinking for round number 3. And because we don't have anything up on the boards yet, just like what we had for the round 2 stream, guys, we're going to have our exposure for the community tail on my Patreon. Not on my Patreon page, on my X/Twitter. That'll be free. I am going to post a slip once again. The 4-man that we ended up posting for today went 2-2. So obviously did not cash for us. A 0.5 hook. Also, I believe you ended up double bogeying his last hole, which ended up going from hitting to not hitting for us. Unfortunate, but it's just one slip, right? We'll move on to the next day, see if we can add on top of it here for rounds 3 and 4. And for that free action, it'll be either an underdog or a prize pick slip that I post over there. Again, follow me on X/Twitter. That is Gsluke DFS is where you can find that. I'll have more exposure on top of the free slip that we're taking. For all of that, that will be on my Patreon page. I got a little bit ahead of myself there before when I was explaining it. But yeah, the rest of it will be on the Patreon page. But for that free slip, no charge. Again, just posted for free there on social media on my X/Twitter. So there's a link to that in the description. Makes it real easy to go over there and follow me. On there, I post a lot of updates when it comes to pin locations, anything notable about the golf course setup in the morning. Maybe they move up a tee box or 2. Maybe they do, I don't know, crazy things with the golf course setup. We've seen it from time to time, live clean in place, that kind of stuff. I'm always posting that on my X/Twitter as well. But until next time, guys, best of luck with all of your exposure, whether it's on the DFS side. I hope to see a lot of your names and logos towards the top end of those GPPs, or whether it's on the pick'em and the prop side. I hope that we can cash out for our moving day exposure. Let's see if we can hit a big one for our free slip tomorrow. Try and add some units to the bankroll today. Was a rough one for my exposure, at least from the prop side. DFS was okay, did pretty solid over there. But for props, a whole lot of hooks that have happened so far this week, and hooks that are keeping full cashes off the board. It's one thing like when you go 2-2 on the free slip that we had today, like it is what it is. The hook on what Nikolai Højgaard fairways, like whatever, right? Because it's not like it was taking away a full cash. It's different when it's like a 6x cash that's a 0.5 away, or multiple 3x cashes that are 0.5s away from cashing. That's when it gets a little bit more tilting. So I'm trying to get off the tilt train, trying to get back into the positive. We'll see if we can do that here on our moving day exposure. And I guess let me see if there's any last second questions. You have our pin locations out? Nah, they probably will be posting them in the next half an hour. They might be out already, Noah, but we're not going to go over them here on this live stream. I'm keeping these one quicker during the fall. Not as many people tuning in, obviously, with it being a smaller event. And I'm trying to take some more time off too with football. I do football content. I do Showdown content for all of that. It's a much bigger time investment. So I'm trying to give myself some time off. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut it off right there. I appreciate all your support on the channel as per usual, guys. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Tomorrow night, we'll be doing a live stream for round number 4. Same thing, going through all of the strategy for Showdown, all of the strategy for your pick'em side as well. So stay tuned for that. But that's all I've got. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night.